Family drama resolution. The moment my cousin realized who holds the power. Welcome to Silent Wars, where we dive deep into the most emotional and transformative family stories. In today's video, we explore a powerful journey of overcoming betrayal and reclaiming power in a family dynamic. Watch how one person changes their life after years of being treated as a doormat. If you enjoy stories about personal growth, family struggles, and finding resolution, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring content. Let's get started. I never thought I would face my cousin Sarah again, especially not like this. The last time I saw her, almost a decade ago, I was struggling to get by, working long, exhausting shifts at a low-paying job while she showed off her newest designer outfits and exotic vacations. It felt like I was invisible in my own family, and every time I saw her enjoying her life, it was a painful reminder of how far behind I was. Her life always seemed perfect, and mine, on the other hand, was anything but that. In my family's eyes, I wasn't good enough. Sarah was their golden child, beautiful, smart, and successful. I was the opposite. My name is Luke, and I'm 34. 10 years ago, I was barely making ends meet. I was working multiple shifts as a janitor in a rundown hotel, living paycheck to paycheck. My parents had passed away when I was still very young, and I was left to navigate life without a safety net. Meanwhile, Sarah and the rest of my family always seemed to have it all figured out. Her parents showered her with everything luxury cars, vacations to places I could only dream of, and all the material things anyone could ever want. It was always easy for her. I, on the other hand, had to work hard for every penny, every step I took. It didn't just feel like Sarah's life was better than mine. It felt like I was nothing more than the family's doormat. Every time something needed to be done, errands, chores, helping with her homework somehow, I was the one expected to pick up the slack. When something went wrong in the house, I was always the one to blame. And when I tried to stand up for myself or ask for help, I was told I was being too sensitive or dramatic. "Why do you always make things so difficult, Luke?" "Just do it," Sarah would say, her voice dripping with impatience. Over time, those words stuck with me. "You're such a burden," they would say, and I began to believe it. My entire existence felt like a series of compromises for everyone else's benefit. But as years passed, something inside me started to shift. I realized that I was not responsible for everyone's happiness or success. I had my own dreams, my own ambitions, and I deserved to pursue them without constantly being dragged down by the expectations of others. I was tired of being the family's doormat, tired of sacrificing my happiness for people who never appreciated me. I wanted something more, something better. I knew I had the ability to change my life, and I wasn't going to let anyone, not even my own family, stop me from achieving my goals. It wasn't easy to make that decision. There were times when I thought about giving up and going back to my old ways, helping my family, bailing them out of their problems, pretending everything was fine. But deep down, I knew that if I didn't take control of my life now, I would forever remain stuck in this endless cycle of self-sacrifice. And that was a reality I wasn't willing to accept any longer. That's when I began to turn my life around. Little by little, I started to focus on my goals, to put myself first for once. I invested in my education, worked harder than ever, and slowly began building a future for myself. But I knew, deep down, that a day would come when my past, my family's treatment of me, would catch up with me. And when that day came, I would have to face Sarah and everyone else who had once treated me like I was nothing. After my parents passed away when I was in my early 20s, I was forced to face the harsh reality of life on my own. There was no one to turn to, no safety net, and no comforting family presence to help me navigate the difficult road ahead. I had to figure out everything for myself. No longer could I rely on others to pick up the slack. I had to work relentlessly, day in and day out, to survive. The first few years were grueling. I worked endless hours at a variety of dead-end jobs, each one worse than the last. From cleaning floors in dirty motels to slinging food at fast food chains, I put in long shifts just to keep a roof over my head and food on the table. Every dollar was hard-earned, and every moment of free time seemed like a luxury I could never afford. There were days when I felt like giving up, when the weight of it all felt too much to bear. But there was always this small voice in my head telling me to push forward, that if I kept going, if I worked just a little bit harder, things would get better. During those years, I knew I had to make a change. I couldn't keep working at dead-end jobs forever. I needed something bigger, something that could truly change my life. I decided to invest in myself, my time, my energy, my money. I started learning everything I could about the hospitality industry. I devoured books, took courses, and spent countless hours online researching trends, business strategies, and management practices. Slowly, I started building my knowledge, one small step at a time. And then, against all odds, something incredible happened. I was able to purchase my own hotel. It wasn't the five-star resort I had dreamed of, but it was mine. I had built it from the ground up, taking risks, making sacrifices, and pushing through every obstacle that came my way. It wasn't easy, and it certainly wasn't quick, but every ounce of effort I had poured into it paid off. The hotel became a respected venue in the area for weddings, corporate events, and high-end parties. It was proof that hard work and determination could transform a life, no matter how dire the circumstances. Meanwhile, Sarah had no idea. In her eyes, I was still that same distant relative who had failed at life. To her, I was just another forgotten face in the crowd, someone who didn't matter enough to even think about. We hadn't spoken in years, and as far as she was concerned, I had faded into obscurity, a nobody with no future. That is, until one night when everything changed. I was in the midst of overseeing a busy evening at the hotel when I saw her name on the guest list for a lavish birthday party being hosted at my venue. My heart sank. I hadn't seen Sarah in nearly a decade, and part of me wondered if she had changed, if she had outgrown the entitled, arrogant person I had once known. But as soon as I saw her walk through the door, I knew instantly that nothing had changed. She strolled in, her designer clothes catching the light, acting as though the entire world revolved around her. Her confidence, her arrogance, it was all still there. In her eyes, I was just another servant, someone beneath her. As she walked in, she barely acknowledged the staff, barking orders at them as though they were beneath her. I could feel my stomach twist as the memories of the past came rushing back. But now, I was no longer that vulnerable person. I was the one in control, the one who had built something from nothing. And tonight, I would make sure she saw that. It was as if the universe had conspired to bring our paths together again, only this time, the power dynamics had shifted. I wasn't the one who had to prove myself anymore. This time, it was Sarah who would have to face the consequences of how she had treated me all these years. The tables had turned, and I wasn't about to let her walk all over me anymore. As Sarah entered the venue, she moved with a confidence that seemed to radiate from every step, as if she owned the place. She was draped in designer labels from head to toe, and I could see the glint of her jewelry catching the light. The entire room seemed to part for her, and her presence was undeniable. She glided through the crowd with an air of superiority, as if everyone in the room existed to serve her. My staff exchanged nervous glances, clearly uncomfortable with how she was treating them, but they were too professional to show it outwardly. She barely acknowledged anyone who wasn't on her level, choosing instead to bark orders at my staff. I could feel the tension in the air, the unease rippling through the room like a wave. The way she talked to my employees as though they were beneath her was exactly how she had treated me all those years ago. It wasn't surprising, but it was still frustrating to witness. After all, I had worked hard to build the place where she was now hosting her extravagant birthday bash, and the least she could do was show some respect. But that was never Sarah's way. I had planned to keep a low profile, to observe the situation from the sidelines. I wanted to watch, to see if she had changed after all these years. Had the time softened her arrogance? Was she different now? Or was she still the same entitled person who thought the world revolved around her? I wasn't sure, but part of me was curious. Little did I know, fate had other plans. As I stood near the bar, trying to keep my distance and remain unnoticed, I suddenly locked eyes with Sarah. At first, she did a double take, as if she couldn't quite believe what she was seeing. Her eyes narrowed in disbelief. Then, without hesitation, her face twisted into a sneer. "What's he doing here?" she scoffed, loud enough for half the room to hear. Her words cut through the air, and the room fell silent. For a brief moment, it felt as though time had frozen. I could feel the stares of the guests all around me, the whispers starting to swirl. My heart raced, a wave of anger and disbelief crashing over me. But I forced myself to stay calm. I wasn't going to let her provoke me. Not this time. A security guard who had been standing nearby took a step toward me, clearly uncomfortable with the tension brewing in the room. "Sir, she's asking," he said hesitantly, clearly unsure of how to handle the situation. I raised my hand to stop him. "I know what she's asking," I replied, my voice steady. It was at that moment I realized the power shift had arrived. The tables had turned, and I was no longer the one who was supposed to feel small and invisible. I turned to face Sarah, who was watching me with a smirk, clearly expecting me to back down and leave, like I always had in the past. But that wasn't going to happen. I stood tall, my posture confident. "Sarah," I said calmly, my voice cutting through the tense air. "Do you even know where you are?" She rolled her eyes dismissively, clearly not expecting a challenge. "Obviously, this is the Sterling Hotel, the nicest place in town. Unlike you, I have taste." She laughed, as though mocking me. I smiled inwardly, knowing she had no idea how much her attitude was about to cost her. "And do you know who owns the Sterling Hotel?" I asked, my tone laced with quiet satisfaction. Sarah's smug expression faltered for just a split second before she scoffed again. "Some rich businessman, obviously. Why would I care?" she said, dismissing my words as irrelevant. I didn't have to say anything else. One of my employees, standing nearby, cleared his throat. With a gleam in his eye, he spoke up. Actually, he does." The color drained from Sarah's face, her expression faltering. The smirk vanished, and for the first time she looked unsure of herself. The room grew quiet, all eyes on her as the realization sank in. She had just walked into the very hotel owned by the cousin she had mocked for years. "Sarah," I said, keeping my voice steady, "do you even know where you are?" Her response came quickly, dismissive and full of arrogance. "Obviously, it's my birthday party at the Sterling Hotel. Unlike you, I have taste." She looked around the room as though she were the queen of the evening, basking in the attention, fully believing that the world revolved around her. I couldn't help but smile inwardly at her response. The old Sarah was still there, the entitled, self-important cousin who had always treated me like I was beneath her. But I wasn't going to let her get away with it this time. I had worked too hard, sacrificed too much, and built something from nothing to let her mock me once again. "Do you know who owns the Sterling Hotel?" I asked, my voice calm, but the slight smirk tugging at my lips betrayed the satisfaction I was beginning to feel. She waved her hand dismissively, her tone dripping with condescension. Some rich businessman, obviously. Why would I care? She said, clearly not even sparing a second thought to what I had just asked. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I stood there, letting the silence hang in the air for a moment. The tension was palpable. My staff, who had witnessed Sarah's behavior with discomfort, exchanged glances, almost as if they were waiting for something to happen. I could feel their eyes on me, but I knew I had to be patient. Then, one of my employees, a young man who had been standing near the bar, cleared his throat, eager to reveal the truth. Actually he does, he said, pointing at me with a barely contained grin, unable to hide his amusement at the unfolding moment. Sarah froze, her entire body going rigid, her face drained of color as the realization hit her like a ton of bricks. The smirk that had been so boldly plastered on her face just moments before vanished in an instant. The room went silent as all eyes turned to her, watching her go from confident to confused in real time. I could see the change in her demeanor, like someone had sucked the life out of her. The proud, entitled cousin who once looked down on me, who thought she was better than everyone else, now stood before me, completely humiliated. She couldn't comprehend what was happening. She had thought I was some distant, irrelevant relative, just a person she could mock and ignore, but now the tables had turned, and she didn't know how to handle it. I pulled out my phone, tapping it casually a few times as if this was just another ordinary moment. I turned the screen toward her, showing her the official hotel website. There, in plain view, was my name, clearly listed as the owner of the Sterling Hotel. The room was dead silent. I could feel the weight of everyone's attention on Sarah, and I knew that in this moment, her entire sense of superiority was crumbling before her eyes. Her confidence, which had been so obvious only moments ago, had evaporated. The cousin who once made me feel like I was nothing now stood humiliated, caught in a moment of reckoning. And for the first time in years, I felt a surge of power, not from cruelty, but from knowing that I had finally taken control of my own story. I leaned in just slightly, lowering my voice so only Sarah could hear. Now, do you still want security to throw me out? I could see her eyes widen in disbelief, the words lodged in her throat as she tried to process the shift that had just occurred. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. She was completely disarmed, and for a moment, I savored it. All the years of frustration, the hurt, the resentment, it all came rushing back in that instant, like a tidal wave of emotions finally breaking through the dam I had built inside myself. I had been the one to always step back, to let her mock me, to let her treat me as if I was nothing. But now, it was my turn. You were so sure of yourself just moments ago, Sarah, I said, my voice thick with irony. I couldn't help but smile a little. What happened? Her face turned a deep shade of red, a mixture of anger and embarrassment, or perhaps both. It was hard to tell, but either way, it didn't matter. She was the one exposed now. The roles had reversed, and she was the one who had to answer for her actions. I let the silence hang in the air for a few moments, watching her squirm. You're right, I continued. We should remove people who don't belong here. I glanced at the security guard who had been standing by the entire time, unsure of how to proceed. His eyes darted between us, but he knew better than to make a move until I gave him the signal. Sarah didn't know whether I was serious or if I was playing some twisted game with her. And that uncertainty, that fear, was exactly what I had been waiting for. Wait. No, she said, her voice now soft, pleading. She took a step back, her expression faltering. Please don't do this. For a brief moment, I almost felt a pang of sympathy for her. But it was fleeting. I had been the one who had always apologized for things I didn't do. I had been the one who swallowed my pride for her, for my family, for everyone, but not anymore. Not tonight. I smirked, my tone playful but cold. Why not? You were happy to throw me out in front of everyone. My words hit her like a punch to the gut. I could see the panic in her eyes, the realization that she had no power here. That was a mistake, she stammered, her voice cracking slightly as she tried to backpedal. I didn't know it was you. Her face was flushed, and for a brief second I thought I saw something resembling regret flash across her features. But I wasn't buying it. I chuckled, shaking my head, letting the irony of the moment wash over me. Oh, I see. So if I were just some random nobody, it would have been fine to humiliate me? The question hung in the air, and I could see the walls crumbling around her. The confidence she had walked in with had completely evaporated. The silence in the room was deafening. I leaned in close, my voice just above a whisper. Wow, Sarah, that's a great look for you. Her hands clenched into fists at her sides, her body stiffened, and I could see her fighting the urge to burst into tears. But I wasn't finished yet. Not by a long shot. In this moment, I wasn't just exposing Sarah. I was reclaiming everything I had lost over the years: my dignity, my self-worth, and my power. She had thought I was beneath her. She had thought I would always be the one cleaning up her messes. But here I was, standing in front of her, owning this moment, and there was nothing she could do to take it away. The ultimate revenge wasn't about throwing her out. It was about making her realize how small she had made me feel all these years. And for the first time in my life, I was finally standing tall. You spent your whole life treating me like dirt, Sarah. And now, suddenly you want to act all nice? I mocked, my voice heavy with contempt. I could feel the years of frustration bubbling up inside me, ready to explode. For so long, I had been the one to take the back seat, to absorb the insults and disrespect, all because I thought I had to. I thought I had to let it slide, to forgive, to keep the peace. But not anymore. Not tonight. Sarah stood there, her posture stiff, her eyes darting around the room as the realization of what was happening hit her. Her usual arrogance, the smugness she wore like a shield, was gone. It was as if the air had been sucked out of her, leaving her exposed, vulnerable. She knew the game was up. The power dynamics had completely shifted, and for the first time, she wasn't the one in control. For the first time, she was the one who had to answer for her actions. Look, I said, my voice lowering to a deadly calm, I'm done listening. Every word was measured, every syllable sharp. You don't get to talk your way out of this. The years of being the family's punching bag, the years of humiliation, all of it came flooding back in that moment. I wasn't going to let her get away with it. Not this time. I turned to the security guard whose discomfort was palpable, but I didn't care. He knew exactly what to do. Escort her out now, I said, my voice unwavering. The words came out with such finality, it was as if I had just sealed her fate. The security guard stepped forward without hesitation, but for a split second, I could see Sarah's face falter. It wasn't fear, it was disbelief. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected me to stand up for myself. She hadn't expected the quiet cousin who always took the back seat to suddenly rise up and take control. Wait, Jake, she started, her voice panicked, trying to regain some semblance of power, but it was too late. There was no turning back now. I wasn't interested in her apologies or her excuses. I was done. I stood there, watching as she was escorted out, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel a shred of guilt. The guilt that had always weighed on my shoulders, the guilt of letting her walk all over me, of never being good enough in her eyes, was gone. It was replaced by something I had never felt before: freedom. As I watched Sarah walk out of the hotel, her shoulders slumped, her face a mix of frustration and humiliation, I realized something important. This moment wasn't about revenge. It was about self-respect. It was about finally standing up for myself after years of taking the low road. I had finally found my voice, and I wasn't going to let anyone, not even family, take that away from me again. In that moment, I knew that I wasn't just closing the door on Sarah. I was closing the door on the person I used to be, the one who let people walk all over him. Tonight, I had taken control, and there was no going back. The power had shifted, and I wasn't going to let it slip through my fingers. The room was still. The dramatic confrontation had left an eerie silence hanging in the air. My family, the guests, and even the staff were all processing the stunning turn of events. It wasn't just the shock of what had happened, but the realization of who Sarah truly was. Her friends, who had once rallied behind her, slowly started to filter out of the room. The whispers between them were loud enough for me to catch snippets. Some were still defending her, but most were beginning to understand the truth behind her manipulation. The mask she had worn so well for years had finally slipped, and they were seeing her for what she truly was. Someone who would do anything to maintain control, even if it meant stepping on those closest to her. I watched as Emily's entourage filed out, their faces a mixture of confusion and disbelief. They had supported her for so long, standing by her side even when I was the one she tormented. But now, they were leaving, slowly realizing that their loyalty to her had been misplaced. Some of them shot me nervous glances as they passed, clearly unsure whether to speak to me or not. I didn't blame them. Emily had a way of drawing people in, using her charm and manipulation to get what she wanted, and now that charm had failed her. Aunt Marie, who had been standing quietly near the back of the room, finally stepped forward. Her voice was filled with concern, and I could see the worry in her eyes. She was the one family member who had always tried to keep the peace, the one who wanted to see the good in everyone, but I could tell she wasn't sure what to make of the situation. "Are you sure about this, Luke?" "She's your cousin," she asked softly. I met her gaze with a calm, steady look. My heart was still pounding from the confrontation, but I wasn't wavering now. This wasn't about Sarah. This was about me, about my own boundaries and self-respect. "She's the one who tore this family apart, Aunt Marie, not me." Aunt Marie opened her mouth as if to argue, but she paused, taking a moment to process what I had said. She didn't speak again. Her shoulders sagged, and I could see the disappointment in her eyes. She knew there was nothing she could say that would change my mind. "Just be careful, okay?" she said quietly, almost as a final plea for me to reconsider, as if trying to protect me from the fallout of the decision I had made. I took a deep breath, my resolve hardening. The weight of years of being the family's doormat, of being the one who always forgave and overlooked the mistreatment, had finally lifted. I wasn't going to let that go unnoticed anymore. I wasn't going to let Sarah walk all over me, and I wasn't going to let anyone else in my family try to guilt me into accepting her behavior. "I'm done being the nice guy," I said firmly, my voice low but resolute. I turned on my heel, walking away from Aunt Marie, from the empty stares of the guests, and from the remnants of a family that I was finally cutting ties with. As I walked away, I felt something I hadn't in a long time: peace. For the first time, I wasn't looking over my shoulder, wondering if I had done the right thing. I knew I had. Sarah's reign of manipulation was over, and with it, my role as the family scapegoat. It was time to take control of my life and move forward. In the days that followed, the storm of angry messages from Sarah's side of the family came in full force. At first, I was bombarded with texts accusing me of being petty, of humiliating my own cousin. The words stung, especially coming from relatives who had always been too quick to overlook Sarah's behavior, but I didn't back down. Some of them went as far as saying I was wrong to call her out, and that I should have let her continue to walk all over me. Family should stick together, they said, as if I had violated some unspoken rule by standing up for myself. I read through the messages, my heart pounding, but I refused to let their anger shake my resolve. These were the same people who had silently tolerated Sarah's manipulation for years, who had allowed her to make me feel invisible and unworthy. Now that the truth was out, they couldn't handle the fact that I had finally fought back. It was easier for them to rally behind her, to defend her, rather than confront the ugly truth of her behavior. But as the days went on, a shift began to happen. Slowly, some family members started to question Sarah's actions. They began asking why she had treated me so poorly for so long, why she had been allowed to get away with it. I could sense the doubt creeping in, and I couldn't help but feel a small, quiet satisfaction. For the first time, people were seeing Sarah for what she truly was: a manipulative, entitled individual who had never once cared about anyone but herself. Some family members who had always been intimidated by Sarah's charisma and charm started reaching out to me privately, expressing their support. It was a relief to know that not everyone was blinded by her facade. People were finally realizing that standing up for myself wasn't an act of cruelty, but one of self-preservation. They began to see that I wasn't the problem. I was the one who had been victimized all these years. Eventually, Sarah reached out. Her message was an apology, but it was half-hearted and filled with excuses. She said she was sorry for how things had gone down, but she also blamed the situation on everyone else, insisting that I had pushed her to behave the way she did. It was classic Sarah never fully taking responsibility for her actions. The apology felt hollow, and for a moment, I was tempted to respond, to acknowledge her attempt at reconciliation, but I stopped myself. I knew the truth. I had spent years making excuses for her, justifying her actions and believing that things would get better if I simply kept forgiving her. But the damage had been done. Her words didn't change the fact that she had humiliated me in front of everyone. The family I had always tried to protect had sided with her for so long that I had been left with nothing but resentment and hurt. I didn't need her apology to feel validated. For the first time, I felt free. I had finally taken control of my life, and it felt incredibly empowering. The best part? I no longer felt like the family's punching bag. I didn't have to carry their weight anymore. I wasn't going to let Sarah or anyone else dictate my happiness or my sense of self-worth. The fallout had been intense, but it had been worth it. I had stood up for myself, and in doing so, I had reclaimed my peace. In life, we often find ourselves in situations where we bear the weight of others' expectations, whether from family, friends, or society. For many, especially as we grow older, the desire to maintain peace or avoid conflict can lead to prolonged self-sacrifice. However, there comes a point when standing up for ourselves is necessary not out of bitterness, but for the preservation of our dignity and well-being. Just as the story demonstrates, breaking free from being a doormat and setting boundaries can be empowering, even if it means confronting uncomfortable truths. The lesson here is that it's never too late to reclaim your life, your respect, and your peace. Sometimes, the greatest act of love and care for others is learning to say no and to prioritize your own health, happiness, and self-respect. It's not selfish to protect your emotional and mental well-being. It's essential. As we age, we learn that it's not about the quantity of time we spend trying to please others, but the quality of the relationships we foster by being true to ourselves. So, embrace the strength to set boundaries, and remember, it's never too late to choose a path of peace and self-respect for yourself and your future. Thank you so much for watching. We hope this story inspired you to take control of your own life and set healthy boundaries. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe to Silent Wars. Your support means the world to us, and it helps us bring you more great content. See you in the next video.